Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. In today's video, I'm going to present my research with a Canadian subarctic indigenous community. And I used a mixed method research and post-positivist approach in addition to case study approach. This is going to be today's content of my presentation. I will be talking about community background, the problem, research aim and objectives, methodology and methods, results and conclusion, and will present a way forward. First, background. Kashechewan First Nation is an indigenous community. It is a remote, isolated, and subarctic fly-in small community of about 2,500 residents located at the North Channel of the Albany River. It is in the southwestern James Bay region in northeast Ontario province. The original community was established around 1743 at Old Post, Albany Island, which is close to the coast of James Bay and prone to spring flooding. And this was the third fur trading post of the Hudson Bay Company in Canada. The community was unwillingly relocated to the existing site in 1957, which you can see in the slide photo, and which is at the high risk of spring flooding. Spring flooding is an ice breakup and ice jamming phenomenon. In 2006, the government commissioned Alan Pope to conduct a study and who recommended relocation of the First Nation indigenous community to Timmins, and which did not happen. The topography of the region, the entire southwestern James Bay region, is flat, low-lying, and muskeg, which is prone to spring floods. Changes in the landscape, resource development, and warming temperatures have significantly increased the flood risk. The community is frequently affected by the flood risk and evacuations every year, which have considerable socio-cultural, psychological, and economic and spiritual impacts. The 2006 flood, as shown in the photo, caused by the downriver ice jam, almost wiped out the community. And the ice was 2 feet on top of the dike, which surrounds the community, and the dike is about 5.3 kilometers long and 3.9 meters high. The problem is that the increased flood risk and precautionary evacuations every spring due to the substandard community infrastructure, particularly the dike, which is ring-shaped or almost round, has resulted in a new way of life for residents. Repeated evacuations cost significant economic, unaccounted for socio-cultural, emotional, and psychological costs. This diagram of Kashechewan highlights the critical infrastructure, particularly the dike, with many culverts. The airport outside the ring-shaped dike. So these are the culverts, and this is the dike, and this is the town and airport at the outside of the dike, not protected by the dike. And the obsolete water treatment plant, which is here, the schools, and health clinic, and the sewage lagoon here. Here in the northeast. The infrastructure is considered, sewage lagoon is also a solid waste pond, basically, which solid and liquid waste goes into this pond. The infrastructure is substandard, inadequate, and vulnerable to spring flows. Research aim and objectives. My research aimed at how the community is affected by and responds to floods. The three objectives were: first, to explore Kashechewan First Nation's traditional and local special knowledge concerning the elevated spring flood risk. Second, to examine residents' experiences of the impacts of actual flood or flooding, frequent flood risks, and repeated evacuations. And third, to analyze the community's perceived adaptive capacity to the increased flood risk. So my research methodology, I adopted the approach which was collaborated by involving the community from the research design stage. I obtained the early input of the First Nation community leaders on the research objectives, respect for their traditional way of life, recognition of communities' traditional knowledge, and triangulation, corroboration, and complementarity of the information. The community's advisory committee provided much guidance and feedback on the instruments of data collection. Individuals participated as capable and active research collaborators rather than passive recipients. My research approach was positivist, and I used case study approach, which guided my research. I used the combination of qualitative and quantitative approaches and multiple methods, including participatory and reflexive techniques, which were useful for the indigenous ways of knowing. Using this case study approach and multiple methods and sources of information provide an in-depth understanding of the problem. About 13% individuals of the sample frame participated in my research. The participatory techniques are reflexive, therefore they are useful, particularly when researching with indigenous communities. And you can see 5 elders, community elders, participated in flood mapping exercise or workshop that was conducted, and the participants or community elders drew a map indicating the characteristics of spring flooding, including ice jams and the flooded area in the past and the vulnerable low-lying high-risk areas. So for first objectives, I used the participatory flood mapping, on-site walk, and photography techniques to collect data. After flood mapping workshops, I decided also to use qualitative interviews for objective 1, which was not initially planned though. For objective 2, I used semi-structured qualitative interviews. And for objective 3, survey research and structured interview method was used to collect qualitative data. The blended sampling strategy included purposeful, snowball, and convenience sampling. I used purposeful and snowball sampling for qualitative research to select participants, rather information-rich participants indeed. Convenience sampling was used to select survey respondents who were readily available. So I included all individuals above 18 years of age who were willing to participate, have had experienced flood impacts and evacuations, and elders who had been observing changes on the land, in the environment, and in the region's hydrometeorology, in addition to river morphology. The sample frame included all subgroups such as sociocultural, economic, and demographic. The strategy enabled me to include 155 community members. For data analysis, I used different software, coding schemes, and statistics. The theoretical framework that I applied included the vulnerability concept by focusing on people's exposure to the hazard risks, their sensitivity to impacts, and adaptive capacity to floods. used adaptation regarding the decision-making processes and actions undertaken to maintain the capacity in dealing with existing or future anticipated changes without actually undergoing dramatic functional or structural changes while sustaining growth. Resilience focused on the First Nations' ability to respond to floods by reducing impacts, sustaining minimum loss, and quickly recover, as well as avail the opportunities that are created due to the change. So now I will present results. Objective 1, flood-prone location. The area is a wetland and muskeg with a very small variation in elevation of the region. The coastline is mudflat and below the sea level. The elevation of reserves decreases as we get closer to James Bay, and the land is less muskeg while moving away from the bay, which you can see in the GIS map. Moving away from the James Bay, and the darker would be the greener color. And getting closer to the James Bay would be the darker, the red color. So community infrastructure, according to the 2005 engineers report, the ring-shaped dike made of gravel and sand has serious deficiencies, which could result in failure during spring breakup ice jams. So you can see this is gravel and sand material. So particularly after the 2006 flood, you have seen the photograph earlier. Residents do not trust the dike that it will protect them in the future. These photographs highlight the vulnerable portions of the dike, including the wall here and culverts here. The dike is not maintained regularly and the settlement is being noticed. You can see here and up here. Despite dike improvement with concrete blocks between 2007 and 2010, it is still inadequate, deficient, and deteriorating with the passage of time, and you can see in this photograph. Flood levels at the airport. The 2006 flood resulted in 5 feet flood water at the airport road. This is the airport road where the Elders William Sutherland is standing and indicating the flood height, which is 5 feet. And this runway was under 2 feet flood water. You can see runway here. Early spring breakup. So there is no annual average change in the river flow. However, the flood waters rapidly increase in spring because of warming temperatures and resultant rapid snowmelt. Ice jams substantially and rapidly increase the flood water. So you can see how big these chunks of ice are, almost the size of a minivan. Climate change. So the community has been observing late freeze-up and snowfall now occurs around in mid-November, which used to be in mid or late October, which you can see photographs that I took in mid-November of the migratory bird, which is here, and the vegetation. I personally witnessed the change phenomena and the photographs I took these. Resource development, or mainly the winter ice road. The winter ice road is built every winter from January to March for about 3 months, which used to last for about 3 months, but now 3 months about 2 decades ago, and its span has now reduced up to 10 weeks. The ice bridge of the ice road on the river caused jam and the 2006 flood, as you have seen the photographs. Holes are drilled in the ice bridge to avoid jams, but the freeze-up conditions block the holes and cause jams. The warming also has reduced the span and safety level of the winter ice road, which has socioeconomic, communication, and transportation significance for the community members. The ice bridge is made on creeks and river, which is about 6 to 7 feet thick, and literally it's an ice bridge to cross the creeks and river. And you can see these heavy trucks are driven over to cross the river using the ice bridge. This is the map which I have reproduced based on the elders' hand-drawn map, which highlight the spring flooding characteristics in Kashechewan. The GIS map highlights 6 major typical jam sites shown in red as JM1 to JM6. These are 6 red spots, which are major ice jams. The downriver JM1, JM2, and JM3 ice jams are critical for the sudden onset of rapid flood reaching several meters high and allowing little or no time to evacuate. So this is the community, and these are 3 downriver ice jams, which they are very dangerous. JM1 and JM2, located about 5 kilometers downriver from the community, seriously threaten Kashechewan. JM1 caused the 1976 floods, and JM2 caused 1976 and 1985 floods. In JM2, this is ice road, and this is ice bridge, is at the ice bridge which caused the 2006 flood. JM3 in the South Channel triggers flood in Fort Albany. This is another First Nation community, but also threatens Kashechewan by blocking here and reversing, and then diverting the flow into the North Channel. The major ice jams and several islands, and these are small ice jams, and several islands in the North and South Channel, particularly North Channel, cause jams and contribute to flooding. So this graph shows the annual maximum discharge. And it is important to understand the timing of annual maximum spring discharge shows that premature breakups caused the major floods of 1976, 1985, 2006, and 2008. So you can see here the red bars. And with flows of over 6,000 cubic meter per second. So these flooding events occurred with the flow of over 2006 cubic meter per second. However, the higher flows of 1992, 1996, and 97, which is more than 8,000 cubic meter per second, were over mature breakups and did not result in floods. This shows that the floods took place due to ice jams and not because of peak flows. If otherwise, these would have been the flooding events in these 92, 96, and 97 years as well. Results objective 2. The flood risk disrupts hunting and harvesting with significant cost implications for hunters who sell smoked meat because it cannot be harvested and is wasted. After the dike, the hunting span has reduced from 2 months to about only 1 to 2 weeks. The hunting is cultural recreation for families while camping on traditional hunting grounds. Flood risk is also affecting the transmission of traditional knowledge from elders to children because they cannot spend time on the land and cannot learn how to survive in the bush or in the forest and how to harvest the meat for the later use in the year. Local businesses are affected the most. A small store owner said that he could not pay his suppliers due to a lack of sales. The daily wage employees, mostly females, at the northern store go weeks and sometimes months without pay during evacuations. People's stress and anxiety increase due to the uncertainty as spring approaches. The uncertainty and fear of being flooded have become a new part of life. Evacuation map shows about 22 different host communities. So the Kashechewan community has evacuated 14 times since 2004 to at least 22 different host communities as far as about 1,000 kilometers away. And the community is always evacuated using airplanes and helicopters because there is no all-season road connecting Kashechewan and Fort Albany with the mainstream Canadian cities and towns. The total average distance of Kashechewan to host communities is 480 kilometers. And this is one of the, Timmins, this was one of the 5 options for relocation of the community recommended by former minister and who conducted a study, Alan Pope. Short-term evacuations. Separation of families cause additional stress. A single mother said that she and her family were separated in 2013 and scattered in 7 different host communities, which increased her stress and caused loneliness. The death of an evacuee during an evacuation is the most difficult time and experience for a family, which returns to Kashechewan for a one-day trip for the burial and traditional rituals. And again, the one-day trip, it is only by using airplanes, which is very costly. Many participants experienced racism in host communities during short-term evacuations. Some decided not to tell people where they were from to avoid racist comments. Moreover, the First Nation leaders were concerned about drug abuse, especially by young adults. Some evacuees were involved in the excessive use of alcohol. Emergency preparedness is more organized each year passing. People pack their bags, shift their household items to the upper floor, manage their grocery supplies, and protect their houses by sealing doors and windows. One participant said that he only takes 2 pairs of clothes, IT devices, and buys clothes in host communities because commodities are much cheaper in those mainstream cities and towns than in remote indigenous communities. The second is long-term evacuation. The long-term evacuees were affected the most. Their houses were demolished, about 39 houses, and house items damaged or destroyed. Paul Wellesley, one of the long-term evacuees, recalled that no evacuee in Kapuskasing knew until the last minute that their houses were being demolished. These long-term evacuees were evacuated to Kapuskasing. He said, "I felt like crying, and we all did." The experiences were not only stressful, but caused culture shock for evacuee families. Paul also said that the experiences in Kapuskasing brought back memories of being in a residential school, and living away for 3 years resulted in feeling disconnected from the community after returning to Kashechewan. These are the newly built houses you can see in the slide, and replace the old 39 old houses. Objective 3, first, descriptive statistical results. Quantitative results support the qualitative findings. 65% of respondents perceive that the flood risk is very high or high. 77% of older, age 40 to 59, and 80% of elder, age over 60, perceive that the risk is very high or high as compared to 53% youngsters, age 18 to 39. 76% think that the best solution to the problem is to relocate, and over 82% are willing to relocate 30 kilometers upriver. A significant majority think that they are prepared for future flooding, and over 77% think that the frequent emergencies have improved their preparedness and coping capacity. Inferential statistic. The inferential statistical results show that the residents' risk perception and perceived capacity are high, which have reshaped their adaptive behavior. The strong positive correlation between the four determinants, you can see the social capital, human capital, governance, and other determinants. The strong positive correlation between the four determinants and the two-way analysis of variance also suggest high perceived capacity. The qualitative results that preparedness has improved are confirmed by the inferential statistical results. Moreover, the results of two-way ANOVA and the First Nations perceive that the First Nations perceived adaptive capacity is high are supported by principal component analysis. So now conclusion. The flood timing and extent has changed in recent years with warming springs, including earlier spring, snowmelt, and rapid runoff. Flood impacts are aggravated by landscape and resource development, which have increased the frequency and scale of landscape. Which have increased the frequency and scale of breakup ice jams. The regular flood risk has significantly increased the First Nations physical and socio-cognitive vulnerability. The flood risk particularly impacts communities' infrastructure, their hunting and harvesting, and the local economy. In addition to, it causes stress. Residents' experiences during evacuations have increased their social, cultural, and psychological vulnerability, and frequent evacuations are negatively affecting their well-being. However, dealing with repeated emergencies have improved their preparedness and coping capacity. The survey results show that the community has high perception of risk and perceived capacity, along with changed adaptive behavior in addition to improved preparedness. Translating higher perceived capacity into greater total capacity would enhance communities' resilience. The way forward, the community or the First Nation should be relocated from the existing high-risk location to Site 5 on reserve territory, which is 30 kilometers upriver, which is a relatively safer location than the existing location. The allocation of the required funds by the federal government shall begin the process. In this regard, the successful relocation experience of a Pewanik First Nation located on the Winsik River, about 400 kilometers north of Kashechewan, can help in timely and efficient relocation of the First Nation. And Pewanik First Nation is this First Nation which was called Winsik First Nation and settled on the Winsik River, was wiped out because of spring flooding in 1996. Thank you very much for your time, and I would like to respond to any question which you would post in the comments, and I would be really happy to respond. And I once again thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to see you in the next video.